My name is Mark Cooper. I'm the director of the U.S. Department of Commerce, part of the federal government, and my job, the U.S. federal government, and my job is to help U.S. companies export, specifically Indiana companies export around the globe. I want to thank Indiana University, where I am an alumni as well of this institution, and I actually was a bellman in the union, so yeah, how about that? And so I know this place a little bit, maybe not like I did 25 years ago, but it was great. And so I want to thank IU Cyber, Christine, Amanda, and all the others, Tim, for their support and also their kindness for bringing a program here to Indiana University. I'd also like to thank the Consul General for being in Indiana today. It's such a pleasure, and it's nice to meet you today. And it's important for us to learn about Indonesia. It's a great place. I spent a little over a month there at the embassy, and it was great. Everybody I thought was really polite and nice to me, maybe because I'm so old. I don't know. I'm not sure what it was, but everybody was really nice to me. And you know, I almost wore my Indonesian shirt today, and it would have been okay, right, if I'd have worn that. Yeah, I almost did it, and I wasn't sure. You know, I had two sides of my personality. You know, I'm a bureaucrat in the government, so I have to wear a suit and tie. So I was really struggling with my two diverse natures. But so we want to say thanks again for your allowing us to be here today. How I'd like to run our panel, I'm going to introduce some brief bio remarks of our panelists, our esteemed colleagues here. We're going to give you just a few brief remarks. Their full bio is in your pamphlet here that you have on your table. But what we'll do is I'll give some brief opening remarks on the Indonesian market from the United States government perspective, and then I'll ask our panelists to give you practical experience. Part of my job and part of our goal and our objective here today is to help build bridges. I believe, and some have heard me say, Andy's heard me say, one of our District Export Council members, thank you Andy for being here, has heard me say that international trade is a contact sport. And so you've got to be engaged and you've got to be involved. And so we appreciate IU today bringing us here so that we might engage with one another and learn. I actually grew up in Columbus, Indiana, so I'm very familiar with that town. So that was nice to hear about I went to Columbus East High School. But our goal is to try to help Indiana companies and Indiana participants as well to learn about a great dynamic market that is Indonesia. And so we're excited to talk about that and see about opportunities, because we want to take this discussion from not just the academic, but to the practical and to the pragmatic. How can we help you as an Indiana citizen, you as an Indiana business? How can we help you do more business globally and by extension in Indonesia and in Jakarta as well? We know, and you may know, that Indiana exported about $37 billion worth of goods last year. And so Indiana punches above our weight as far as a state and as an exporter. As far as the APAC region, Indiana exported about $25 billion to the region as a whole. So we are all about trying to see what are the opportunities in this market, and that's actually my job, to show and to bring Indiana companies to foreign markets. And we hope that with our panelists' practical, from the trenches experience, they'll give us more. Let me see if I can get this to work. I'm not sure. Let's see. Oh, maybe this will do it. You've already had a great overview, and I'm not going to belabor the point with all the statistics, because I think my former panelists and former presenters have done most of that. And so, nope, that's not the one. Let's see, there we go. Okay, so sorry. So this is just some little factoids. If you're on Jeopardy, now you can actually answer some of those questions about Indonesia. But you know, it's really a dynamic place, and there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think that's the overarching message. Let's see if I can get this to work. It's slow, but it may work. Yep, I'm begging it to keep going. There we go. It slowly does it. So this talks just about some of the activities here. What I think important to note, and I think this is basically a division and a tension in Indonesia, is the division between emerging technologies like the financial tech that we talked about and some of our former panelists talked about, and then the traditional economic areas and industries that are prevalent and predominant in Indonesia. So you have on the one side, you have some of the Facebook, and you see some of the statistics about the connected world, the integrated world electronically, and all the things we use with technology. And then you have the extractive industries, and you have the sectors like energy and mining and things like this. So there's a duality and a sort of a tension there between how do we balance those and what are the opportunities? Because it's great to say, obviously, the dynamism that's in some of these emerging techs, but what can you do? And I hope that that's what we are able to capture and encapsulate here as we talk. Just a little bit more today. So we looked, and we've already talked about the growth. And so the point is that Indonesia is a growing place. It's a potentially good market for Indiana goods and services, and you'll see that there's a steady growth rate, and these statistics bear that out. You've seen some of that already. And so this slide talks about some of the growth, the 5% growth, growth expected again this year the same way, and then talking about U.S. exports grew 14%. So you're seeing, and we've already talked a little bit about this earlier, that there is some cause for optimism in this part of the world. I want to mention also the White House. This is important from the President's perspective, that Southeast Asia is important to the White House now, and there's an Indo-Pacific strategy that the White House is putting forward. So we're looking at a lot of these markets and how there might be some dynamic potential for them. And so we see this. I think it's important to note the emerging middle class, because I think that is really where you see a lot of purchasing power of who am I going to do business with? Well, a lot of these folks are in the middle class of these countries of Southeast Asia, where you can say these are folks who want to do business with me. We can see the jobs that are growing are in these kind of segments. So hopefully you'll note that these are folks that want to do and have a propensity to do more global business. So if you look at Indonesia's growth compared to the rest of Asia, you can see it's doing pretty well, that their investments are up, exports are up, there's growth in infrastructure, and we could look at that in great detail. But suffice it to just say, there are opportunities here, and we want to give our panelists a chance to hold forth on that. I think it's important to say, and this is something when I was there in Indonesia, I helped write the Country Commercial Guide to Doing Business in Indonesia. That's something the embassy puts out every year, and they ask Americans, typically officers, to help edit that. And this was something that we have been concerned about, right? And my former speakers and colleagues and participants have mentioned, it can be tough. You know, there's bureaucratic problems, and there can be difficulties in getting things done and the paperwork. And so the ease of doing business and the growth of that, I think it's important, because I think someone said it, you don't want to run around spending all your day trying to get something stamped or something, done that way. This is, so we're hopeful that this trend will be continuing in Indonesia. We already noted it's 72 out of 190 and up some slots, so we hope that continues. So the strategy, and I think this is important to look at here, and this is something a colleague of mine said in Indonesia, so I'm going to quote him. If you want to be successful in Indonesia, you need the 3 Ps. You need patience, persistence, and presence. Patience, persistence, and presence. So the first thing I want to say is, just like in any of the developing world, you've got to be patient. It takes longer. Many Americans are looking for short-term wins, quick deals, turn it around, sign it now, get on the plane and get out of there, right? I mean, that's an American mentality in some ways. But in the developing world, especially in Indonesia specifically, it takes longer, and you have to understand, the culture more, and so this is important. You also can't give up. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes there are roadblocks. Sometimes there are difficulties. And so you have to keep working at it. And so it takes a long-term vision. And I believe that is really an international trade, a trait that almost every market holds, that you need to look at the long term, and you need to be persistent about it and not say, well, I took a trip there and nothing happened. Well, sometimes one trip doesn't do it, and so this is important. And so, as the Consul General mentioned earlier, a distance is a factor, and so you have to factor that into your business process, so that I might need to go to Indonesia more than one time in order to make it happen. The final thing is to have a presence. I said, as I alluded in my opening comments, that international trade is a contact sport, so you got to be there. You got to go. You can't know if you don't go. There's a Cooperism, so you can't know if you don't go. And so that's really true. And there's nothing, we can show you 12 videos, we can show you 16 sets of slides, we can do all that, but if you don't experience the market, there's nothing like the traffic in Indonesia to make you appreciate, what it's like there, right? And all the, as my colleague back there was saying, all the motorcycles and such. This, that's you got to be there to feel that, man, and smell that exhaust right in your face. You got to know that's happening. So that's important. Some of the prospects of the U.S. government from our country commercial guide that we have talked about, and there'll be others, and Robert's going to talk about one of them in his business. But some of the ones that the U.S. Embassy has highlighted are energy, aviation and defense, and I think the Consul General had mentioned some of these, so hopefully they overlap. If they didn't, I would be worried, right? So hopefully there's a bit of an overlap here. So energy, aviation and defense, also healthcare, and the statistics are on the slide, so you could feel free to read them if you wanted to, and information technology, and things in the IT, high-tech sector. We've already talked a lot about financial tech. So these sectors, they're important. Also, just to drill down on that a little bit more, software, education, and consulting, those are also promising sectors. And we're going to talk about the role of infrastructure as we ask our panelists to tell us more. I'm getting ready to go there in just a moment, but before I do, I'd like to mention a couple of upcoming initiatives that the United States government has in Indonesia and some things we're doing. We have Asia Power Week, we have U.S. Power Working Group for Indonesia, we have the U.S.-Indonesia Aviation Working Group, which actually I was a part of when I was there, because we're trying to increase cooperation between Indonesia and the U.S. in the aviation sector. And I did a little bit in defense. That's a pretty big sector, Indonesian defense sector. So these are some initiatives the United States government has. I'd be glad to chat with you more. That's my job, to help you connect via the U.S. Embassy to all global markets. Wherever we have a U.S. Embassy, I'm connected to those folks. And so I'd be glad to do that as a Hoosier. So without any further ado, I'm going to get to the fun part of the program. So I'm going to take a moment and give a brief introduction to our panelists. I'll just briefly highlight their bios, and then I'll ask them to hold forth a bit. So this is Robert Huang from Delta Faucet. Robert has led global sales and marketing for Delta Faucet in China, APAC, and the Middle East. For Delta. And as a leader for these regions, he is responsible for recruiting people, development and sales and marketing and management, and driving the overall profit and revenue growth for the company. So you can learn more about Robert from his bio in the pamphlet that we all received on our table. Our second panelist is Dr. Toby Malichi. He's the founder and chief executive officer and global business diplomat of Malichi Group Worldwide, dubbed the go-to guy for all things trade by his contemporaries. So Dr. Malichi has operated in 70 countries for over 37 years as an influencer, expert, trade advisor, and advocate for advancing free trade agreements on behalf of 4 White House administrations, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and multinational and small, medium-sized businesses. So you can learn more about him in the pamphlet as well. So I'd like to start our conversation. I'll ask Robert to start, and then Dr. Malichi to follow, and we'll start with the macro approach. And so we'd like to ask our panelists, why do we as Americans and Hoosiers, that's what they call people from Indiana and at IU, why should we look at Southeast Asia? where and why should we look at this part of the world as a potential for growth that we could actually make money? Because that's really what it's about, right? We're trying to make a living and trying to grow our businesses. So if from a business perspective, Robert, if you'd like to tell us why Delta Faucet looks at Southeast Asia and Asia specifically.
Sure. First of all, I'm very glad to be here. When I was in Duke, the game of basketball we never miss is between Duke and IU. So thank you for having me here. Answer the question why we look at Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is one of the most forgettable points when it comes to international trade, because when we talk about international trade, many Indian companies think about one, China, two, probably Japan, but never go beyond those points, right? But when we look at this market, I'm very surprised. Number one, the population. How large is the population it is? Indonesia, 260 million people. Philippines, 90 million people. Vietnam, 90 million people. So it offers you almost, plus other small countries, 500 million people. That's a huge population. That's number one. Number two, the growth. If you pull out the IMD, the growth map, one of the fastest growth region is Asian, right? All those markets I talk about have enjoyed over 6% annual growth year by year over the past several years. Number three is the potential for the future. The young generation, the Southeast Asian has the youngest population I've ever seen in the world. Vietnam, Indonesia, over 50% of the population is under 30. Man, that's something you cannot ignore, right? But one thing that I want to share with you guys is, it's not by number, is I go there. I travel to Southeast Asia every quarter. I just come back from Indonesia yesterday, 22 hours on the flight. Far, right? But as Mark said, persistence and presence. You be there, you see. I've been in Southeast Asia for 6 years. Indonesia, for example, 3 years ago, I flew to Indonesia. I spent 1 hour on the airport, just pass custom, get my visa. Old airport, hot. Get in my car to my hotel, 1 hour drive. 3 years later, new airport. 30 minutes past the customs. New subway, new shopping mall, and more people can speak English. That's a dynamic I really enjoy personally. So I just put there and wait for you guys.
Okay. Dr. Molokai, tell us about your experiences in Southeast Asia.
I'm going to back in it differently, and then we'll get down to why we actually do business there. And I was telling, a lady asked me, have I actually been to Indonesia? Yes, I have. We've done business in Batam, Jakarta, and Medan. I chose Indonesia for a lot of reasons, but I'll allude to that just for a moment. One of the things that I've been blessed to do for this, our country, is I probably worked on, advocated for 80% of our free trade agreements. And I was telling the Consul General that. So no one's more disappointed than I when TPP, I was telling Shoba, when TPP was ripped up and torn up. But I also, on public record, as saying, not only to the president, but to others, that you'll see the United States come back into TPP. Why? Some of the things that Robert just said. I happen to know, I was telling the Consul General just shortly that Indonesia, I represented the U.S. at APAC, I represented us in the ASEAN as well, in the WTO for SMEs, that Indonesia wants to come back into that fold. Just what you outlined, by 2030 is the magic number. 1/3 of the world's population will be in that region. Shoaib, I have 2 millennials. They're twins. They're 19, and I don't understand them at all. Yeah, and I'm the daddy. It's like, what are you talking about? But I listen to them. But the millennials will be the purchasing power in that regional world. China is in that area for RCEP, which would be 27 countries. Emerging market in Indonesia that we liked about, we first got in Indonesia through coal, C-O-A-L. Indonesia has a huge coal supply. And one of our businesses was coal. We had a technology called a calciner, and a calciner, this technology we had could take coal. Indonesia has some of the dirtiest coal in the world, but that's the best coal in the world. It's bituminous coal, because we could take it, clean it, process it, and it comes out little briskets like you have on your barbecue grill, and it's smokeless. And Kingsford Barbecue Grill, bought that part of us out. The spices, if you love to cook like I do, they got great spices come out of Indonesia. And so we did a little bit of the spice business. Then also we were into wooden furniture. Some of the most crafted, best wooden furniture in the world, I feel, comes out of Indonesia. One of the great things are like, we are what's called a multinational SME and not a micro-national SME. And I was curious, and I appreciate Ms. Nahida's comments, that you have 50 million unbankable SMEs in Indonesia. We probably have that in the United States as well, maybe a little bit higher. We don't talk about it. It's one of the number one problems is access to capital, access to money to do business. The great thing about it, when you go to emerging markets like in Indonesia, I played basketball. This is my alma mater too. It's called Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis. And one thing I tell people, I'm a former Hall of Famer, basketball in Indiana, you cannot be in Indiana and not play basketball. When you're born, you're given a basketball. But when you go around the world to trade, a place like Indonesia, trade is second nature to them. It's indigenous. So we don't have some of the same kind of hurdles that we have here in the U.S. They want to get down to business. They want to barter talk. You have to be careful. I told the Consul General I really admired her courage, and Rita said that about the corruption aspect of it. Malichi Group Worldwide, we do not pay corruption fees. We do not get involved with that because there's a thing called the Foreign Corruption Practice Act, which means I'll go to prison. Everybody who works for me will go to prison. So I call them participatory fees. It's a way of getting around them. And why I raised that story up, there was a war called the Iraq War. You may remember the Iraq War. And we got a phone call telling us we're interested in some half-truck trucks, and we want a certain kind of engine in it. And I'm a former General Motors executive, so I knew where the trucks were going to be made at. We need a power plant. There's a company called Cummins that does them. And I said, well, okay, that's something we don't get into, but let me make a phone call. So I called the State Department. And the State Department said, just hold on, Dr. Malichi, for a few minutes, we'll get back to you. So they came back to me very shortly, and they said, walk away from the deal. So walk away from the deal, walk away from the deal. It turned out this particular time during the Iraq War that the Indonesians were actually working as intermediaries for Iraq. So had we taken that deal, then I would have been in violation of my company been certain things, we've been up in prison, which leads me to deal making, is why we chose Indonesia as well and doing business in Indonesia. Now I sent the best ambassador that I could to Indonesia. My oldest daughter, she's an international model. She just left Bali. She loves Bali. You mentioned tourism. Tourism is huge. That's something we're kind of looking at. I know you're spending a lot of money in tourism, right now, and something kind of stabilize the rupee as well. So it's beautiful to me. Now, I never saw any motorbikes at all. I never saw any pollution at all. But I'm kidding. But but from the standpoint and to hear Nahida talk and Shoaib talk about the great things that they're doing and disruptors and things are coming apart, that's encouraging. That's a long way from 2005 and 2007. And so you're doing things to step up to 2045 and 2030 that other places around the world are doing as well. You're opening your markets up a little more freely to come in and do business. The regulations, you're doing something better about as well. So it's becoming easier for U.S. businesses to do business in Indonesia. Like Mark said, trade is a contact sport. You can't just don't go down one time. So we got this great company and we're number one back here in Indiana. It doesn't mean anything down there. And so sometimes Americans got to check their egos back here before we go forth.
Okay. So if we can move the discussion, so we started our discussion under the framework of why Southeast Asia, and both these gentlemen have told us and given us a great overview of why Southeast Asia is a dynamic region of the world, the growth, the dynamism, the youth, the desire for American technology and goods. That's important. So let's change the focus a little bit narrower now and ask you, and we'll start with you again, Robert, to talk about why Indonesia. Why, when Delta Faucet, you mentioned that you are in more than one market, in Vietnam, looking at perhaps Cambodia and some other places. What made you as a company strategically? Because look, here's the point. We all have to, in business, it has to make business sense. I've done business for many years, and it's not just, there's a lot of wonderful countries, right? We're not talking about that, but we want to say, how can I make a living? So Delta Faucet, and not just in saying it's a beautiful place and we love Bali, but to say they saw a business opportunity in Indonesia. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I can share a story about why we choose Indonesia. Actually, our Indonesia journey took me almost 3 years, over 3 years, because Indonesia, when you first look at Indonesia, you'll be like, wow, this is a huge market, almost 300 million people. I cannot forget it, I cannot give it up. But when you parachute yourself into Indonesia in Jakarta, you're like, where should I start? 300 million people, over 17,000 islands, right? And you can't. So when we first took my journey 3 years ago, we did not work very well. To work well in Indonesia, you have to have right product, right partner, and right timing. I think 3 years ago was not right timing for us. Not right timing for us. Why? Because at that time, we feel we're not ready at the Delta Faucet Company because our product was not very developed in terms of style and the function. When you deal with Indonesia, because Indonesia is aggressive coastal area. And
Robert, can I stop you? Just in case some of our folks do not know what Delta Faucet does, why don't you tell them what the company does first?
Okay.
How about that?
Sure. So Delta Faucet is a faucet company.
Well, that was easy.
Yep. So it produce faucet, shower heads, and we sell into like a retail channel in Indonesia and B2B like hospitality groups, construction companies, developers, right? So this is a kind of products you may find in Hon.D.Bus, Ferguson, right? In your lavatory, in your kitchen. Right. So should I go back to?
Please.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you. They sell faucets, just want to
just make sure faucet. All right. So, so that's 3 years ago, right? We are not ready, and our partner was not very well because we found our partner. That's one mistake we made through our friends, our networks. Right? Doesn't work. But this time, with the help with Mark, we started a new process. Number one, we collaborate with embassy. We choose 10 candidates to interview, 10. And I spent almost 4 months to interview customers and persuade my favorite customer. I flew to Hong Kong to meet the whole team member, or the board member, to convince us. So find the right partner is key for this market. Number two, is right timing. When working with the embassy, I travel to different cities. You cannot get a sense of market of construction without going to the market, see the cranes, construction sites, right? Construction workers. I see huge buildings, construction site. I talk to developers. They tell me what's the project line, pipeline on the table. So we think right now is the right timing. And actually, we just launched our brand 2 days ago. I was in Indonesia, together with embassy, together with 90 VIP guests, and everybody tell me it's the right time. We have a lot of projects on the pipeline to develop. Right? But the one thing I want to caution here, I want to be a little bit devil advocate here, is that as any other emerging markets, Indonesia also is heavily impacted by the political activities. Right? B2B activities right now, they are in a little wait mode until the next president election, which is next April, right? So even if I express myself as a little mixed feeling, but on the upper side, I'm more positive about Indonesian market, and this is the right timing to start with.
Okay. Dr. Molokai, so you told us earlier about that you've done some deals there in coal and some wood furniture. Can you explain how you did that? Did you find a partner? Did you sell direct to a customer? Were they in Jakarta, in the Java Island, or were they somewhere else? Because I think that was an interesting point perhaps to make, or at least to think about, that where do you start? Do you start in Jakarta, or do you go somewhere else? And how did you figure that out?
Great question. Actually, I had met someone at a conference like this in Washington, D.C., and we networked and spent some time together and went through some steps that I recommend for all MSMEs. And one thing that attracted me to Indonesia was the fact that you're doing things for your MSMEs. Mm-hmm. You're doing a lot for MSMEs. The government is taking them more seriously, I think, now than years past. They're doing some things to make getting microloans a little more easier now. I keep coming back to that because that's a problem in the U.S. that we kind of sweep under the rug a little bit, but it's a reality. It is, particularly with minority businesses in the U.S. But connections are everything, and I happen to be vice chairman of the board that Mark's our director for Indiana, and so I have access to some pretty good intelligence. But I always say these 4 things. There's 3 things if you want to do business in Indiana right now. Indonesia is ripe for this. That's trade, agriculture, and manufacturing. Those are 3 things right now. If you're going to start a business right now, those are 3 things you can do right now in Indonesia to open up and start doing business. You asked me about transportation a moment ago. Bataan, I think, is a great hub, industrial hub for transportation. I think it's just a short ride across 45 minutes, I think, from Singapore. I think you can go in right now. They're open for business. 4 things I always say, 5 things that we use in going out, doing business in Indonesia, and how we got involved in these deals. Because we all get excited, we're happy. International deal, Indonesia, Singapore, great. Well, I looked at the triangle, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. That's an industrial triangle. That's a power triangle. Also, you can throw Thailand in there. But it's these steps I always use for everybody in doing business, and that's due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. Repeat that again. Due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. For any business, any country. Number 2, know before you go. If you're going to go to Indonesia, like we're talking about timing, know before you go. Do your homework. Be prepared. No different than anything else, but know before you go. You leave out. As I said this to Americans, check your egos at the door, because trade is indigenous to these countries, whereas basketball will be here. You will get your lunch handed to you. And you'll walk out like, aha, you really got them, and you got a host in your pocket. There's no money in there. It's gone. Number 3, what we do, we call PREP. PREP is our trademark. Potential risk for export profitability. Potential risk for export profitability. And what are those risks? What are your goals? What do you know about the culture? What do you know about the currency? What do you know about the people? What do you know about the person you're doing business with? And then connections, you mentioned connections. Connections are so important, and they have high-level executives here and leaders in the government here. These are extremely appealing. So I'd encourage everybody to get to know them why they're here. It's very important. It makes it easier. And then, do you have a fail-safe strategy? You ever get to a foreign country, you're in a hotel, you have no money, people are supposed to show up to do business, are not there, you're in a panic, the person you met is not there, and all of a sudden, people look at you kind of crazy, and you may be asked to leave the country, may not be asked to leave the country. What's your fail-safe strategy? How do you get your money back out? The person's take your money where it's gone. How do you come back and get out of it? A lot of Americans, SMEs, really don't think about that going in. From a deal standpoint, there's 4 kind of deals that you can get involved in easily that we liked, as well going in. The first deal, I won't use, it's an acronym that I use. I'll say what it is, and you let your imaginations run, okay?
You're scaring me now, you know.
Well, this is my Washington, D.C. response here. The first deal, in 4 type of deals, are they show high interest in stops. Now you can figure out what that acronym means. They show high
we got
interest
it.
in
Okay, yeah,
stops. On those right there is that you meet somebody, they're happy to do business with you, it's exciting, you're exciting, it's the first time you exchange cards, and next thing you know, there's no interest. Just stops, and you don't know why. Secondly is the unicorn deal. You talk about the unicorn deals. I love unicorn deals and disruptors, but our first unicorn deal, we made $2 million on code as an MSME. $2 million, I stopped working. The company stopped, everything stopped. But the company didn't grow because we lived off the $2 million. We found ourselves in trouble, so that's a admonishment for unicorn deals, but they're out there and good deals. The third one I call is the deal killer. The deal killer, you'll meet someone and be a contact, and you'll get involved, you're going to go to the table, it's a cross-border transaction, Malichi Group Worldwide helps facilitate the close of those transactions. Then all of a sudden, somebody in the deal decides they don't like what someone else is making out of the deal. And so they begin to kill the deal, and then time kills deals. Americans notoriously are not patient doing deals. We get in trouble that way. And the fourth one is there's no deal. In other words, you think you've got the right people at the table, you've met them at this conference, you're down there doing business, and they're, oh yeah, no problem. Come on. Yeah, I know, that's my cousin. Come on. We go, and you're talking to con artists or scam artists. So the 4 things you kind of watch out for that they do in going in. But again, it's not just Indonesia, it's elsewhere. But if I were a company looking to do business in Indonesia, I would certainly look at tourism. They're looking for foreign direct investment for tourism as well. Trade, agriculture. Indiana is a huge agriculture state, and manufacturing is huge. It's also in transportation. So those things are attractive. They're easy to get into. I think the market's open. The coordinating, I think it's called the Coordinating Ministry of Economics, is opening up where they're now helping SMEs to do business with SMEs, say in the U.S. And I like your reference to the sandbox, is that no longer you can get your license, we know what your business is, what kind of type of business it is, what your business plan is. In order to get a license, you got to abide by the rules. I think that's a huge step for anybody looking to go to business in Indonesia.
Okay.
Can I add one thing?
Sure, please.
Because Dr. Molokai said about the deal-making skills and the experience. Actually, I have one thing to add here, is the easiest mistake you can make when you come to not Indonesia, but any emerging market, when it comes to finding your partner, is the bigger, the better trap. So many times you go to the meeting, so your partner comes to you and say, I'm the best, right? I have the bigger portfolio, I know this connection, right? I know that connection, I have, my boss is the biggest boss in the town. But you do have to be careful. Do you really need me? Or do you really have motivation to develop my brand in the market for me? Because sometimes because you're an American brand, they will just want you to put on the portfolio. So that's why I spent 4 months interviewing 10 candidates, not necessarily the biggest. We had the biggest customer in certain country, failed miserably. Why, right? But the best partner I ever found is who really are the same development stage as I do. In that market, we can grow together.
Right.
That motivation, you have to talk to him, right? So I just want to share with you guys, the bigger the better mindset is not sometimes not working in emerging markets. There's a huge information asymmetry in the market. So just to share with you guys.
Yeah, that's great. Also, I love Medan. We started a Molokai Global Business, which is a strategic business unit of Malichi Group Worldwide in Medan, because I'm so pro SME, so pro MSCs, to where we actually are helping SMEs to get into business, into trade, but the stipulation is they have to give 2% of their gross profits back to a venture fund. Now you've come a long way, since then, but it's working. But they have to give 2% of the gross back to a fund. We take that 2%, and then we help to another SME to grow. And so we've done a lot of business in Medan. I like Medan. I didn't know where Medan was. I first went to Jakarta. There was some high-level people from Medan. Actually, Medan is the second largest business district country in Indonesia. I was in Jakarta for about 7 days. I kept saying, Dr. Malichi, you got to come to Medan. Come to Medan. I don't want to come to Medan. I want to come to Medan. I want to come to Medan. Come to Medan. Come to Medan. I'm glad I did. We spent another week there, and it was just the opening and the willingness. You don't want to do business, and you just got to use good business sense. And I will say this to anybody: I am a capitalist. I am in business to make money. I do not apologize for that. And a lot of people do. We do not. I have kids, and they're in college.
I think our panelists have made the point. I think it's a great one to choose your partner carefully. Brother, Dr. Malichi said due diligence. And so one of the things that the U.S. Embassy does, because I think I should plug the U.S. government a little bit here, is to help you find partners in the market. The U.S. Embassy has a service called our Gold Key Matchmaking Service. And that matchmaking service from the U.S. embassies all over the world helps you, just like we helped the gentleman here at the table, find partners in these markets that are pre-screened, pre-qualified. So these meetings that we set up for you, and I've been doing this 25 years now, and working for the government, and my mother said, "Are you going to get a real job?" One time, so I don't know. But 25 years later, here I still am.
You're doing great.
But it's important to note that the embassies are on the ground, and they're there. Some of the colleagues that are locally employed staff have been working at our embassies for 20 and 30 years, and they're natives. So they know the market, they know the culture, and so this is important. As a business person, for you to say, how can I meet pre-screened, pre-qualified folks? And so I think, knowing your partners is really critical, because you're investing all that energy and time to go to a market. You want to make sure that you're not, I like the bigger is not always better, because you got to be really careful and taking the time. And I think, these gentlemen are a good example of taking the time to know a partner. You can't always just fly in 5 minutes, have a half-hour meeting, and make a decision. Sometimes it takes a little longer than that. And I'll reference just quickly, I was in Vietnam a number of years ago with a company here from Indiana called Maxon Corporation. And Maxon makes industrial burners. And it was great because a former DEC member, who many of us know here, Bill Connors, took me to his apartment. I lived there in Singapore for about a month, and we went to Vietnam. And we were doing a deal, basically. We were helping him find a distributor to sell his product. So it was great. We have, I'm going all over Ho Chi Minh City, and it's great. I meet all these people, and we interview them, and we're talking to them. His comment to me, so we have sort of a debrief at the end. So who are we going to look at? Who do we think is the right one? Well, my choice was the guy that was the sales guy. He was telling us this great story about, I can sell anything to anybody at any time, anywhere. I have all these connections to everybody. I was like, sounds good. Sounds pretty good to me. So then we interviewed another guy that said, well, I don't have as much experience in the sales side, but I have a PhD in mechanical engineering, and I know the technology, and I know the country. And so I thought, pick the sales guy. You know, he said, I'm picking the guy that knows the business and has a PhD in this product line, and we can teach him how to sell it. Now, that doesn't work every time, but it just shows you how, you know, you have to be thoughtful about what's going to fit your company. And these gentlemen are good examples of taking the time to know that. So let's dig into that just a little bit deeper for both of them. And maybe, Robert, you can start then and tell us the story of Delta Faucet's experience in Indonesia and the partners and what the outcome of these meetings you're doing and what you're launching and how that went and how you experienced those meetings and what you talked about.
Yeah, so first of all, so Mark mentioned about the embassy, his program. Through the process, let me start from here. The government, the US government, the US embassy, especially when your brand is not famous in the market, embassy can act as a very good, even great brand builder or credibility builder for you. Let me give you a quick example. So I got the project lead from my previous Korean company colleagues, 2,300 feet project in Indonesia, Jakarta. Will be the future tallest building in Jakarta. I got a lead, all the director, manager name, business card, I got it. I sent an email, I called them, no answer for 1 month. So I went to Jakarta on a trip, and together with embassy specialist, 5 p.m. I can't leave. I said, I can't leave without really digging into this lead. So I talked to the colleague from embassy. I said, can you do me a favor? Just call them and say you are from embassy. See what will happen. 5 p.m. She called them, that project team. I'm from embassy. Can we just meet tomorrow? Is it possible? Yes. 9 a.m. Are you okay? Yes, I am. I will delay my flight for you if you can, right away. Embassy, one phone call saved me 1 month, right? And we become the first brand, American brand, into this signature project under specification. So, first of all, I will say, if you want to start something, start with this program and the embassy. They will give you big help. Now, take one step back. How we started Rebooster Indonesia, right? Rebooster Indonesia. Like Dr. Molokai said, due diligence, do your homework, compliance. Does your product really fit the market? Is there any entrance barrier, right? For example, Indonesia, over the past several years, actually is very business friendly. Let me give you data. So you judge a country by how many standardization they have and how many standardization is compulsory or voluntary, right? So among ASEAN's region, I mean, Singapore is very restricted. You have to do a lot of testing, your product to enter the market. Indonesia, there's standardization called SNI. They have 10,000 SNI on the table, right? But not everything is voluntary. Only 209 clauses, SNIs, are compulsory. This is 2018. But 2015, how many? 207. So in 3 years, they only increased so many, only a few clauses. Why? Because this president is very business friendly. He wanted foreign investment. He opened the market for you. So that's the first thing. You have to make sure you have deep knowledge of the market. Number two, to find a partner. So find a partner is the right process. As I mentioned, you have to have the right number of candidates to get to the right partner, right? Why I choose 10? Why choose 10 out of 10 and I choose 1? Look, you enter Harvard, if I want to apply for Harvard, what's the ratio? Harvard's acceptance ratio is around maybe 10%, 6%. Mine, if you want to become my partner, 10%. So quantity will determine the quality, right? So that's very important. So I talk to the customer, I want to judge whether this customer, he needs me. And believe it or not, from Japan to Vietnam to Indonesia, my best customer among the interviews are the customers who was not willing to deal with me. They say, yeah, I don't need you, and you have a lot of difficulties. I have to interview them, I have to give them 2 or 3 rounds of presentation and convince them we are the best brand in the US, and we are, right? They're the Faucet Company, and they are impressed from low level to middle level to high level to the president. No pain, no gain. Guys, no pain, no gains. So do that, the process. Number 3, change your mindset. Fast execution. Emerging markets like these countries, they run very fast. They run very fast. This morning, 5 o'clock, my customer in Indonesia comes to call me. I'm like, hello, 5 a.m. So sorry, Robert, we need your answer by 9 o'clock. Project bidding in those areas, in those countries, count not by days, but by hours. Because if you don't run fast, your competitors will. So you have to, if you want to run into the market, run with the right mindset. Here, we American people, like including my family, right? We like to strike the balance between life and work. There, they really want to survive and thrive. They run very fast. So they need your answer. Then when they expect you this, you have to behave like this. So that kind of mindset is also important to win not only the business, but win trust. Because they want to find somebody who shares the same mindset with them. And I see many companies fail because they cannot meet that expectation. I'm the best number one company in the world. Why should I match with you? Okay, it's up to your choice. So I think that's what I want to share, how to succeed in Indonesia. Okay.
Dr. Malichi?
And I love your company, Twoman Company. Start with one. Those are the most powerful companies in the world, incidentally. You can do a lot with them. First, I'm going to Indonesia. I was talking about know the culture, know the people. And I went to Indonesia. I saw some in there. I thought they were brothers. I thought, hey, brother, you look like me. Hey, and you're like, so I'm like, oh, but we had the same complexion, the same hair. So one day we were talking, but the dialect didn't come out quite the same. So I kind of had to back up, regroup a little bit, and that taught me something about, my enthusiasm sometimes gets ahead of us. I said sometimes Americans aren't very patient, so you've got to, walk out slowly. Since I'm involved with the embassies and the consulates through being the vice chairman of the board, there's 2 things that's come to my mind. Mr. Tim Smith is here, who is the vice president of Development for Institute of International Business for IU. Is Laverne Shagel in the room? Lavon is the managing director. And then Christine Davis, which is cyber, which I happen to serve on advisor on all these boards here. But this brought something to my attention. I was speaking with President McRobbie of IU about this. Look who we have right here. Before her 5-year term is up, I'll become your good friend. Look what we have right here. And you just remind me of that, Tim, that in Indonesia's countries, some of the best due diligence and connections right here at Indiana University, right here in the room. You don't have to travel 22 hours, that trip. It's only 26 hours going out. But she's right here. She's the vice chairman, 5 years left on, and the director right here, the consul general out of Chicago, which is 2 hours and 15 minutes from Indianapolis. They're right here. So we have to go down. So I thought about Indiana University holding this great conference. You might put that on. We can talk to alumni. You're right, they're right here. Save you a lot of wear and tear. They've been here, they know the culture, they know the state, they know the businesses. They got degrees, business degrees from here. And I listened very, very carefully, to that. And there's a saying, what you said was said so loud I barely heard you. That's a very, very important point. Two, what we're looking at and opening up new markets and helping SMEs to get in Indonesia is fintech and blockchain. That's the next big move. I don't think a lot of the world is not quite there yet. So we're all kind of going up from the same platform. Now, I know IBM is probably more advanced in blockchain, but fintech, with Singapore, you know, being a hub, we talk about the financial part of Singapore being, I think it's probably the greatest financial hub in the world right now, such as the foreign trade zone there. But Indonesians can also help you, ladies and gentlemen, do business with Singapore and Malaysia right there, all three in the industrial power zone. So there's lots of advantages of doing that, but you can talk to alumnus who are right there on the ground doing business that can make it so much easier than going in now and trying to reinvent the wheel. Just what Robert was saying. And so there's lots of opportunities, but know before you go, plan it out, due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. In case you didn't hear me again, due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. You lose a few pennies and you'll find out what I mean by that.
Well, we want to say thank you very much for allowing our panel to be here today, and we appreciate our esteemed colleagues giving us their advice and their wisdom from doing business from the trenches. It's nice to hear folks that actually do the business tell us more about it. And so we want to say thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and thank you again to IU.
No questions.
And I'm going to ask them exactly that. I believe that we are all better when we know each other better. We're all better when we know each other better. So we hope that activities and meetings such as this can allow us to know each other better and know a wonderful country like Indonesia better, because we believe that the opportunity is through knowledge. And by learning together about a dynamic market such as this, we're all better individuals, and we also learn a little bit more about the world, that we're all one family together and we can all trade together too. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Again, I'm Mark Cooper, Director of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and I thank you for allowing us to be here and part of this exciting program today. I don't know if we have time for questions, but we have our panelists here, and we'd be delighted to ask and answer them if you have questions for us.
I have a question.
You do?
I have a question.
I thought you had all the answers.
You pay, I do.
Oh, okay then. Okay, what's your question?
This, as you said, Michelle, is a business tool. We do business, we're in 70 countries right here using the Delta Faucet. It's a business tool. It's the best inventions, getting greater and better to do things. Here's my question to everybody in the room. What question did we not ask you?
What should we have asked you? That's perhaps a good question. Maybe what didn't we cover?
Why are we here? What are we looking at?
It's a fair question, and I think our panelists and all of us hope, besides the existential question of why are we here, but the hope is that we can see that there are opportunities in global markets, that the world is smaller, that the world is becoming more integrated and more connected together. And I believe that opportunities such as this and seminars such as this allow us to connect in such a way that we can learn more about a world that gets smaller. So instead of a global community that is extra large, it's maybe just large now as we learn more about each other. So hopefully that was the purpose. And then to be practical and pragmatic. You know, how can we help you, not just in an esoteric or academic way to discuss these topics, but to drill down in a specific way. How can you do business globally? Because that's our goal.
Good.
Other questions? Sure, please.
So I'm Lydia. I'm from St. Louis, from Webster University, and I took an MBA. And my question is like same like he said, how we must start our business. For example, like this. I already have my MBA. I a little bit know about the business one, but when we started in the new, like in the real world, it's very difficult how we must start it. It's very true that the partner, like, it's very difficult to find a partner, and especially if our partner, like, we know Indonesia have a lot of opportunities, but the thing is, like, the people in there is not like, their mindset is a little bit difficult, like, they still like not like conversation, like, not very modern, so it's a little bit difficult to understand what they think, and I don't know how to persuade them to be a business. For example, like, if we have like an agriculture, and I don't know how to make the business maybe grow more. Like, I have this opportunity for them, but they say no, it's not very fast, like, I couldn't do it. I cannot have a lot of volume, like, for the business, because, like, if we want to have, like, export, they must have a lot of stuff. And then, like, the thing is, I don't know how to persuade them, which don't have a lot of, it's not a lot of experience, but which don't have a lot of education about the business, and then to persuade them to be in our business, and that's it. My question.
I'll ask our panelists to hold
Dr.
forth
Varka,
first.
you want to answer first?
Great question. It's a very important question. Here's what I would do. There's a few things that I would do. It's a very difficult task. I know exactly what you're saying. Is that I would I take a piece of paper and I make what's called a T graph, like a T. And on the right-hand side, I may have strengths, weaknesses, pros, cons. What are we hoping to get out of that market? Who are we hoping to talk to in that market? And you'll see as you start to write down that the yeses, the pros will be shorter than the no's why we shouldn't be in business, or what the difficulty, the problems that you're having. I would, my 37 years in experience and 20 years, 30 years of doing trade, before I would strike out, identify exactly what your goals, what you're really looking for. You gotta be like most laser focused now, because it's so broad right now, like laser focused. What are the 2 or 3 things that you're looking for you can turn? Now, here's where most SMEs fail, and a lot of corporations have failed. You gotta make sure you're talking to the kind of people that can pay you. There's no use talking to people that can't pay you. The hardest thing to do is to get paid in doing business around the world. So try to identify those industries, people that will pay for what you're trying to do, your service. And that's 2. Number 3, and this is a new one, I think Robert will agree with this. Try to find a value chain, a global supply chain that you might go in and talk to some of their people. For example, a Delta Faucet, an Amazon, an Apple, a Cummins engine, for example, a big farm company, Cargill, for example. And try to identify someone in that company you can talk to, maybe in purchasing. Believe it or not, purchasing people have a lot of knowledge and wisdom. They don't like to talk. A lot of people don't like to talk to them because they always think they want something. And then see if you can't partner with that company in their supply chain. Volunteer. Just say, look, can we come to your conferences? Can we come to your meetings? Just volunteer. You'll get a wealth of information, and it'll help you to begin to store. You're starting out like this. It'll help you to hone down to eventually you'll come to the point, free knowledge. And so it's a hard road to travel, but you got to really identify with it. A lot of people really don't know. So that little T-graph exercise, that we still do it. 37 years, we still do it. Why? Why not? What's good? What's not good? And then tune in to who you're talking to. If they're not talking the narrative you want to hear, if the optics aren't good, what you look interested in, don't waste your time. I hate to be cold-hearted about that. Ben Franklin said time is money. So just don't waste your time. It will frustrate you. You'll get angry. And you may want to end your business. Don't, because you have the spirit in you. You got the education. You got the drive. It's right there. You got the passion. Because the number one thing you got to have is the passion. I heard when you were asking the question right there. So I'll talk a little bit more in detail to help you, but I hope those few things will help you right there. Did I answer your question? Thank you.
Robert, comment?
Yeah, so I totally understand where you come from, because I'm an MBA, right? I graduated from Duke. When I graduated from Duke, I thought, I know everything about business, until the day I become a salesman. Salesman, I think, teach me one thing called skin in the game. Skin in the game.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, let me share with you what if I were you, what I would do.
Yeah.
As a salesman, I learned how to deal with rejection. Every day is rejection.
Right.
Every day is rejection. Now, how you overcome rejection is how you become strong and can become
right.
succeed, right? First, you have to know who you are, what your product is, from bottom to the top, from inside to the outside. Because, for example, my faucet. My faucet can be as low as $50 to as high as $2,000. Can be used in lavatory, used in kitchen, used in airport, used in hotel, used in anywhere that the water will flow. You have to know
Right.
what your customer wants. But how do you know that? You have to talk to them. Because the first thing you will hear from customers is, we have this brand, we have this brand, we have this function, we have this style. You don't have it. But you have to ask her what does he or she really wants, right? Like, I went to one occasion, I talked to a customer, and at the end I found that he's not looking for a faucet for lavatory, he's not looking for a faucet for the kitchen, he's looking for a faucet for his mom. His mom is not very mobile. So our touch faucet, which make her very convenient to use a faucet, is what she's looking for. Those need, understanding your customer need, is what you can start with. Mm-hmm. Number two, I cannot stress enough that you must develop that killer pitch. You have only 1 to 3 minutes to impress your customer. Let him decide you should go or should stay, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that communication skill, that only 1 minute you can make him stay with you, that communication skill is what you should develop.
Right.
And number three, as Dr. Malichi said, talk to as many people as possible, right? Join this session is a good start. Talk to Dr. Malichi, talk to me, talk to all the friends here. Business is connection, right? And that's my advice.
Let me add just a couple of comments because I'd like to make that and then I'll finish. One is to show that you can do it, that you've already done it, that you're a success by being right here. To Indonesians that are looking at market, you're a great success story. Mm-hmm. And that you have come from wherever it is in the country that you're at and you've educated yourself and you've succeeded to some degree. That's a great testimony. So that's something I want to say. The second is when you're looking and at the business side, what's your comparative or competitive advantage? That's something you always have to know. Why, either trying to talk to an Indonesian and saying, hey, you should do it. First of all, say, I did it. I came out of where I was. I don't know what you did or where you came from, but I went to school. I educated myself. I'm interested in business and you can be successful too. But the reality is, you have to have an advantage to their product. So the people you're talking to, you have to think about them too and saying, hey, do they have something that can be sold? Can whatever it is that they have, is there a market for that? And then finally, show by example someone else that's doing it. Find somebody in the environment that is doing something similar and say, see, they did it, you can do it. And by using those steps and the steps I think our colleagues have described, it helps because one of the biggest things, whether you're Indonesians, Americans, Hoosiers, is fear, right? Never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing. But part of your job as an ambassador of IU and everything else is to say you can do it too. You can do this. You don't have to be afraid. It can be done. And not to let fear cripple you. Don't let what you're not rob you from what you can be. Mm-hmm. All right.
That's good.
Other questions? And I think it's about time for us to wrap up. So I don't know if we have time for one more. If not, any other questions? All right. We want to say thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thanks again.
Very good.